On this episode of the Beamable Game Dev Podcast, I sit down with Sean Durkin and Dave O'Neill from Supernimbus. Let's get into the interview. Sean, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us today. And Dave, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Dash?
Doing fantastic. So we're just going to jump right into this thing here. And Dave, maybe you could tell us about your first gaming experience.
First gaming experience, I think if it wasn't in some pokey arcade down the back of a shop somewhere, I'm fairly sure it was when my neighbor got an Atari 2600 when he was like 6 or 7 years old. And I've just basically moved into his living room and became an expert on Space Invaders, Dig Dug, and what was the driving game? Midnight Run, maybe, on the Atari.
Pole Position, maybe?
Ooh, I'm going to have to check now.
I don't have it on my shelf anyway, whatever it was. I don't see any.
Yeah, Atari 2600 must have been 5, 6 years old probably when I played it first. That was the start of my love of favorite games.
I love it. I'm right there with you. Pitfall and Pac-Man, you know, all the classics. So, Sean, how about you?
I honestly don't remember, but I think it probably was something in the early 90s, probably a Commodore or the Amstrad CPC. I think it must have been my cousin, so it was like the next door down from our house. So we would run down, and occasionally when the machine had to be like taken out and set up specifically if somebody was doing accounts or something, and then we would kind of get to play some games. Kind of really remember the games that we were playing, but I think it was like Bubble Bobble and a few other ones.
Classic. How about right now, Dave? What are some of the games you're currently playing?
Okay, I've got a spread going on at the moment. So when I'm in the action adventure vibe, I'm actually replaying Cyberpunk at the moment because it's a glorious mess, but man, it looks good. It's so fun, and I'm a sucker for Cyberpunk. I'm playing Total War Warhammer 2. Playing Total War Warhammer 2 because I'm a massive grand strategy fan and a huge fan of the IP. I love that. And I'm currently working my way through the early adopter content for Baldur's Gate 3. It's still in early access, but it's so good. And I'm a big D&D nerd, so they made digital D&D, and it's great. So that's what's on my plate at the moment. If only I had like more time to actually play games instead of make games.
I understand. Sean, how about you? What are you currently playing?
Trying to keep replaying Oxygen Not Included whenever I have time, but I usually get very frustrated after about 100 hours and then kind of rage quit when everything falls apart, start a new game, come back to it a few weeks later. And then every now and again, I will throw on Biomutant, which I'm trying to get through as well.
That game, it kind of surprised me. They have like a $300 special edition or something like that.
Yeah.
I walked into GameStop. I'm looking at Dave's eyes right now. I walked into GameStop. They have it the other day. I was like, this thing is massive.
Yeah, they get some great marketing on that too.
Did they give you an actual mutant for $300?
Yeah, it's a whole lot of stuff, and like, you know, the normal steel case, and like there's a few other things you get for like your $300. But I mean, the game's pretty good, but it's not like they don't need to have a special edition $300 box for this game. You know?
It's like, am I going to buy a console or the special edition of Biomutant? What are we doing here? So, let's talk about Supernimbus. All right, Dave, what is Supernimbus?
So we are a back-end service company. Both myself and Sean are front-end developers originally, who kind of meandered into back-end development. We've been doing that for a number of years now. We used to do professional services for a back-end company called GameSparks. We were with them for a number of years, working with studios all around the world. And we were with GameSparks when they were purchased by Amazon, and we were integrated at AWS Game Tech. And after we were there for a couple of years, we decided to leave and take our knowledge out into the market and start branching out into other backends and continue doing the work we've been doing.
Sean, I'm going to head over to you. What got you interested in game development?
Probably, I can kind of specifically say that it was some copy of Half-Life that I had that I think my mate gave me that came with the Hammer editor. which was the original like source editor for Half-Life 1. So I probably spent orders of magnitude more times playing around with that engine than I did playing Half-Life, and Half-Life is one of my favorite games. So after that, I just decided that's it. That's what I'm going to do.
Love it. Love it. Dave, how about you? What got you interested in game development?
I was in second or third year of art college, and we had a module in graphic design, and I was actually playing, as it turns out, D&D with the lecturer from that class, and he gave me a copy of Oblivion for PC. Not Oblivion, Morrowind. Now, I've dated myself now. This is 2001. And with the PC version of it came the modding tools. The first version of like the creation kit, or would be the creation kit and the get kit for the later Bethesda games, and I was completely blown away. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I can just build anything I want. I could write my own quests. I could make my own characters. That's it. I was hooked after that.
Love it. One of the things I like to ask the different guests that come on is what's the biggest lesson that you've learned as a dev? And I'm gonna ask both of you this one, and it's because I know that there's going to be new devs that are listening or watching this, and I want to just offer them some advice. Maybe it's like lessons learned, mistakes made, whatever it is. And Sean, I'll go ahead and start with you.
Sure. I guess the best advice that I can give as a kind of a holistic piece of advice to anyone is that basically call yourself a developer and own that. Don't call yourself a programmer. Developers don't just sit in front of a computer and hack out some code. They're involved in the entire process. They talk with the customer. They have to know exactly the needs. They don't second guess. They don't skip planning. They're developers. They are involved from start to finish the whole way through. So that's the most important thing, and it's the thing that we try and get when we're trying to hire people, when we're looking to work with people. Are they taking responsibility for the whole project?
Dave, how about you?
I think probably the biggest lesson I have learned is that communication is key. Communication is everything. Communication is what differentiates a senior engineer from a junior engineer. It is the reason why senior engineers are senior engineers. It is not because they are better at writing code. They are senior because they're better communicators. They're better at imparting information both to the teams that's under them, but also between customers and clients, between service providers, and every facet of your business. It all comes back down to communication.
Love it. Got to make sure that communication is on point. Sean, how has Beamable impacted development at Supernimbus?
Well, it kind of we were looking for us coming from GameSparks. We built a ton of stuff in GameSparks and a ton of stuff in AWS Core Services. We played around with a bunch of the other tools, the other backend services that are out there. We were looking for something that kind of comes into the overlap of GameSparks features. Beamable fits quite nicely there. It's nice compared to some of the other platforms that we've evaluated and we work with, where there's never really a no answer. If we're looking for a solution to a problem, the answer is never no. At the very least, it's like, okay, you can do it. You kind of configure it in your own way. There's always a workaround, or there's always a solution right there open for you. And that just makes things a lot easier for us. It's like, it becomes a no-brainer when the answer is never no.
I love it. Dave, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
For me, it's probably the workflow. So, I mean, I came into working in backend as a front-end developer, so I was primarily front-end, and I had to expose myself to all these backend things. And now that I've kind of gone through that, it's really nice to come back around to Beamable, a backend tool that's seated inside Unity, inside your front-end tooling. So it kind of lets me take all of my experience and just work in this one nice homogeneous way from this one editor where I can, build everything, test everything together, and deploy it really seamlessly. I really like the workflow. For me, it's definitely the biggest winner out of working with Beamable.
Love it. Well, I want to thank both you guys for joining me today, and
you're welcome.
We'll probably be doing this again. So thanks so much.
Cool.
Thanks for taking
No
the time,
problem.
Josh.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Beamable Game Dev Podcast. To learn more about Beamable, head on over to beamable.com.